the Stone Age are as a beginning. There is a beginning Stone Age. So we will begin with Stone Age and with the burials. Kustās, jā. Tā, un tagad šito. Un tagad par šito, jā. So, as we know, burials are most informative source for archaeologists. They tell us a lot about past societies. Materiality of death includes most aspects which are concerned with bodies, burials, and beliefs. Important in this connection is also the grave inventory. And in our Stone Age burials, outstanding part of funerary equipment during the Neolithic period is amber jewelry. Amber has been found in the grave inventories on specific burial grounds, as Zvejnieki Krejci and so on, and in a single graves within the residential sites. All these graves date from Middle and Late Neolithic, when natural amber became accessible. The processing of amber and exchange of raw materials and objects began and was organized in a wide scale. So there was previously some discussion about amber. We have not deep amber sources in our earth. It's all washed out from southern parts, from the Kaliningrad region. And it was washed to our coasts, and it was covered with sand. And in this Neolithic period was a second wave when it was washed out and it became accessible for Neolithic people. And so it began the amber working things, and amber appeared in our sites, and the amber appeared in our burials. And of course, the main source about burials is Zvejnieki burial ground in northern Latvia. So there is our region. After ice retreat, there was a big drumlin field and an empty space in the middle. Empty space in the middle, and it was Paleo Lake. Here you see this Paleo Lake, and today it is only in the deeper part survived. And we made our survey, and we find in this northern part a lot of Stone Age sites. Here you see our sites, on the Stone Age sites on this northern part, following also the old coasts of ancient lake. So on the gravel ridge, which previously was an island on the old Paleo Lake, there was arranged Zvejnieki archaeological complex. It was consisting of big burial ground here, and two sites, Mesolithic site and Neolithic site. So it's whole complex, burials with the sites. And amber graves were concentrated on this Neolithic part around Old Farmstead. There was excavated 19 amber graves, you see, dominating by male graves, and then female, and child graves, and some undetermined graves. So here you could see these amber graves. So this Neolithic part with old house, and here is Neolithic graves. And there are individual graves with single skeleton and are these multiple collective graves, as you see, and a lot of them are dated, and you see they are quite compact in the time. It is middle Neolithic and a little too late Neolithic, but in time they are very compact. One period when these ember graves appeared and existed. So, as I said already, there was individual single graves with embers, and also was these collective graves. And some of these single graves, they have a little different grave inventory. It consisted of mainly of ember buttons and ember pendants, and also some art pieces. And here you could see that is our ember. It was thousands of years in the gravel, in the harsh gravel, and so it's already not as we know ember, but it's only we could say the form and where these artifacts were engraved. But of course it is no more shining, no more yellow or red, but anyway, we could say. And so in this one grave you see there was necklace with buttons and with pendants, and also in the hip region perhaps it was some fastened to the dress. You could see here also this detail. And another single grave was necklace made from art pieces. This was a necklace under the chin. There was birds and also pendants. As you see, it is in profile human faces. In this group, it's characteristic for these single graves. And then we must turn to the multiple graves, to collective graves, which are dominating in these amber graves, dominating these collective graves. And in collective graves, there are buried 3 to 5, 6 persons, and with rich inventory, not only amber, there is slate, flint, bone, antler, and also amber. Very, very rich and interesting traditions we could observe in these collective graves. So it's our first collective grave. With four buried persons and very close in 2 layers, and interesting in this burial back, but what is this? In this burial is interesting that here is arranged special offering place, deposits with very, very intense ochre, as ochre in all this burial, and here also ochre, and there you see this deposit, this offering place with bone and antler things, with flint, arrowheads, rhomboid, and leaf form things, and also amber things between these. And some of them are damaged, they are broken, as it is in some desk codes already characteristic. And also in these burials we find out convent pit ceramic. It's also the characteristic trait of these burials, common burials. So we could move to the next one. Next one, here is only 3 persons buried. 2 males with heads in different oriented, and here is small child on the shoulder of this man. And here is, you see, a flint inventory. Also, it's not very good thing, but all was in red ochre, and head was with very red ochre, and fallen out from eyes was these 2 amber rings, perhaps. And as we know, these traditions, they naturally was in the eyes, but they found out by the head found out. So it is one of these burials, collective burials. The next one, also collective, mainly with males, one female and others are male burials. And it is very rich in amber. This burial was rich in amber. Here was jewelry, but we thought it is not to this man, but it falls out from this man's chest to here. But this also have two metal rings, perhaps copper, perhaps bronze, and this animal head. And in this case, we were happy to, when we take out blue plastered clay from the face, we find out in eyes two amber rings. You could see in this detail, these amber rings in the eyes. And it was often we see this tradition in these collective graves, and always in the male graves. These rings are in the male graves, covered the male. So our next collective grave with 4 grown-up persons and some small childs also between them. Of course, these bones were not in very good preservation. They were very fragile and small. So this is one on this pit. On the side of this pit was male with very rich amber ornaments. There is 56 ornaments in the hip region. And you see here we are a little elaborate. It is some fiction, but we elaborate this. It could be in realistic, in originally, it would look in such a way, these ambers. So, also a rich, intense ochre used, and a lot of bone and antler household things around. And here also was ochre and amber jewelry on the chest part. And in this case also was amber rings plastered with red clay and ochre mixture and plastered on the face, and 2 amber rings in the head. And so we could return to this first, to 221, and with this amber jewelry. As we considered from previous burials that these amber rings are in eyes and very close, this covering with ambers, and there are these 2 small rings, and there was inside was small children's bones. So we are interpreted it as it is not belonging to this male, but it is small child wrapped in something and with ornaments. Small child's burial with these 56 ambers. It's our version, of course. And besides this burial was found this small clay idol as a symbol of fertility, and you know it's very well known in this group of burials. So it is our last collective grave, 2 persons, and it was later now not so recently excavated, and it was excavated by Professor Larsson, and he will tell you about this more detailed in the next lecture. Here is seeing how it is excavated, it is going under the house. It was quite difficult to excavate. So, but you will see about it. So, about these collective graves, yes, it is this 2025, the burial. It is just after we take it out of the pit and take off this plaster, clay plaster, not such a scenery we saw. And for these burials, as I said, they were multiple, 2 to 5 persons. They were buried with rich inventory, flint, amber inventory, and with pit and comb ceramic. And it is this complex for this collective graves, amber complex, characteristic with such a pendants with these rings and this clay figurine. As we know, it is very widespread in comb and pit ceramic. Professor Nunez mentioned these figurines as very characteristic trait of this group. And it's also in our burial ground. And it is real how it looks, amber pendant. So it is a territory of comb and pit ceramic, and where these burials are found, they are found in Latvia, in Estonia, and a lot of such graves were found in Finland, but there is this acid soils and bones didn't preserve, they disappeared, but only there is with very intense ochre pits and with amber things, and sometimes they are in a head region, and there are also some clay found out, and in this clay 2 amber rings or battens or so, and Torsten Edgren, Finnish archaeologist, Stone Age specialist, also interpreted it as it is the same tradition as we saw it in our graveyard. And it's in many Finnish graveyards. And these are Kolmhartikka, Vateranta, and Kokenmäki and some more. So it's very, very interesting tradition, and also this tradition is met in northwest Russia, some graveyards in Tudozero and other things. So we can say it is characteristic for this common pit ceramic areal, and also we saw close traits in Scandinavian pitted ware culture, and also in North Russian pit and comb ceramic areal. So it's very big areal with these influences. During the Middle Stone Age, mainly, in this period, as was these datings previously I showed you. So we came to some amber as ornaments made from this material evidently had a special role in the lives of Neolithic people and in their world beyond the grave. Amber, this cool yellow and reddish stone, which appears as if it had soaked up the northern sunlight, was evidently more than just an ornament. It also had magical and protective power. As we know, particularly clear, we could see it in these rings and discs. As it is already from Paleolithic, also Stone Age, we met in sites in burial grounds that it is as a symbol of sun, of sky, and of universe. And also we could see these parallels also in as we saw in comb and pit ceramic was this area, but this tradition of amber rings, it is global, it is more human all over the world. We met these traditions. We met in archaeology, in ethnography, we saw this tradition in Eastern Islands, in Africa, in Asia, and only some. At the moment in our art museum is an exhibition with wooden carvings, sculptures, and some of them have these in eyes, these rings from perlmutter, and also these cowrie shells, and you could go to our art museum and see, but only I want to show only some samples for this. All you know from Jericho, this very famous heads were taken off from skeletons and on separate, and it's also this idol from Finland, also made in such an, it's also Stone Age. And then we have in folk art, as I said, from very, very different parts of world, these sculptures made and with perlmutter eyes, and yeah, also we have this cowrie also in eyes we met, and it's very such a tradition in our archaeology and in art, in our ancient life of our people, old people. So, and as to end with this, I will show you one example how it is interpreted in our days, these old skeletons from Africa, how it was interpreted. I saw it in an art shop in Brussels. So, thank you. Thank you for your attention.
And the next lecture by Lars Larsson, Sweden, with the title A Double Grave with the Amber Decoration from Zvainieki, Northern Latvia.
Sorry. Remove this there. There, okay. That one, yes, please. Well, I'm going to continue about Zvainieki, and as Dr. Zagorska mentioned, it's the second stage, so to say, of the excavations. And just for the international public, I would like to point out the place in the northern part of Latvia, where the Zvainieki settlement is situated. And as mentioned, but cannot be emphasized, that Zvainieki is a very, very important site in a aspect that it's been used for a very long time, for several millennia, and its situation in the center, more or less the center of a huge lake, was very attractive for a long time, and also for not only for settlement, but also, as mentioned, for burials. And we are now moving into the cemetery and the eastern part, where we have the most of the later graves and the star. And during the 60s and 70s, Francis Zagorski and also Ilga excavated more than 300 graves. And they excavated most of the area, but as mentioned before, there was a farm that was not able to demolish at that time. But was the limit for some of the graves and or the excavation of graves in this area. This is the farmhouse, and in this area there was a veranda, and this wasn't excavated in the 60s and 70s. And Gasagowski and myself, we arranged the project in the mid-1990s in order to continue the research about Sveinike. And we started with a lot of people together with us to do research on different aspects of mainly the cemetery, but also about the settlement as such. So when we finished that in 2005, we started the new excavations. That continued, included some excavation at the cemetery, but also at the different parts of the settlement. But I'm going to concentrate on this settlement cemetery inside here. As perhaps you remember from the last presentation, most of the amber graves are situated in that area. And we started with the excavation here in that area, as pointed. Well, there were two pits that were of special interest. There were other graves, but most of them were more or less demolished by later graves and also probably later activities around the house. We excavated an area to the north and to the east of this farmhouse. To the north there were no real graves preserved, but to the east there were several of them that I was going to show later on. And one of the pits, filled with black soil, also revealed these two individuals. And they started to become very, very interesting, as we saw something down here at the neck, two rings, or part of one, and one intact, and a lot of amber at the hip and between the legs. And this is a female aged about 35 to 40. The other one is a male aged 25, 30. The male had also several ornaments of the amber. They were situated at the east side of the skull, and there was also, as mentioned before, this cover of clay and red ochre, and there was one amber bead that had fallen down here. You can't see it on this photo, but it was probably situated as an eye. So that's a continuation of these burial habit. Well, the problem, I can show you another, more detailed one, with the rings up at the neck. No beads or anything of amber close to the skull, except for these two. Well, the problem for us was that this was just at the edge of the abandoned and ruined house, and we wanted to continue the excavation, but we had to find out the owner of the house, and thanks to Koski, she got the permission. So this was excavated in 2007, and we continued the excavation in 2009. And to understand, we were very, very eager to continue and see what's going on. further down, so to say, in the grave. And I could also show you further that there's a flint knife close to the head of the male, and also here down here there's a dagger made of deer bone. Not only the female who is well decorated, and this is the result. With most of the area of the burial ground covered with red ochre, more intensive, for example, at the hip of the female and at the skull of the male, for example. Well, in this case, there are, I think, even the black and white looks see much easier. You see, as I mentioned, the rings. Then there are a couple of amber beads close to the trunk, but the most of them are found in this area. More than 100 beads, measuring from 5 centimeter to about 2.5 centimeter, and a larger one on the top, and further down the smaller ones. And I think you can see that there are some kind of arrangement among them. It's sort of lines, and if you want to go into detail, there's at least 8 rows of amber beads, becoming smaller and smaller and smaller down here up to her knees. And except for a couple of amber beads, there's not anything on the rest of the legs, except for one. That's the only animal tooth that had been perforated, a tooth pendant. And that is the only one that we have found in this grave. For the male, as I mentioned, in a knife, but also a number of beads close to the head and one in the eye. And then nothing except for down here. There's a concentration of amber beads and a few ones also at the foot of the feet. On the legs, you can see some arrangement here, down here as well. That's tubular bones from birds that have been cut and used as beads. It has some decoration on legs as well. And there are a couple of down here, so they were probably fastened to the shoes. So that's the arrangement of the decorations here. You can also mention that here in the furthest down and down here, there are not only amber beads, but also beads made of bone. Show you some of the decorations. These are the amber with the rings. Large one, probably intact when it was when the female was buried, about 7.5 centimeter in diameter. The other one has probably has broken early on and then perforated and used as a sort of decoration, and that is about 9 centimeter in diameter. And then you see the larger ones. Some of them more oval, some of them more rectangular in shape, and almost all of them with a rather flat road side to the body, and a little bit rounder to the outside. Most of them perforated with one perforation, but in few of them also with 2. And except for a few ones with rectangular, they are more or less similar in size. Same here with these. And we do have a couple of smaller amber rings as well. And these are the beads made in bone, very similar to those found in amber. Globular eggs. This is the flint knife artifact, and also the dagger made of or the mail. As I mentioned, the division of these two, is male and the female, how they were decorated, and the different types of amber beads that you find in the female. So there's a sort of division between males and females. This is how it looked like in the veranda where we excavated. There are single graves, but there are also multiple graves. This one included 4 different people. And there's also a double grave of young people. And as you can see here, there's a variety regarding the dates of the graves. Most of them belong to this Neolithic, according to the Latvian chronology. Not only the double grave, as you can see, there's 2 dates, one of the female and one of the male, are rather similar. And if you use some other methods, you can see identical dates. But we do have some, like this one, with another similar date. But we also have, and some of these very early Mesolithic grave, and that one as well, without any grey goods at all. And then later on, we were able to get into the house. Double grave is not shown, but it's situated here, and it's been cut through other graves because we got finds of human remains in the filling, and they dates to about 6,000. So at least one earlier grave was destroyed, and maybe another one close to it. That one is partly destroyed by the grave. So there's a marked division between deep graves and shallow graves as well. This one is a shallow grave, but of about the same date as this double grave. So this double grave here fits very well to the other graves. For example, as Dr. Zagorski mentioned, this 221, if you remember, with lot 56 amber beads, situated close to where we have been excavating here. And I'm happy to hear about the location of the grave, because that grave was a main grave, but having these all bones of a child that could be a female. Because otherwise there would be the same decoration in one male and one female grave. So, just to end, you can see the male and the female, as I mentioned, very close together. We also dated the dagger because we wanted to see if there was any freshwater reservoir effect on humans. And it turns out that the dagger is dated about 100 years later. So it's not that important. I know that in other places in the lake there's larger differences, but here probably they were not eating that much fish as the later ones, or those situated another area in that lake. But anyhow, as you can see, the dating of the bone in the filling also showed that there was a destruction of the graves. So it's now about, I think, about 150 beads that was found, except for two rather large rings, and a number of bone beads. Concerning these large amber rings, you have a lot of amber rings in the Baltic. As far as I know, not as large as these two that were found together with the feet. But if you look, as also mentioned before, in Finland, you find those slate rings that are as large or even larger than these. That's one example of similarities between the Baltic and the Finnish grave traditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, the next lecture by Ilse Lose. Amber in the Diekste settlement of Comp rural culture.
Šeit. Šeit. Šeit arī
Ja? Nepievākšu pa šito būtiņu, jā? Labi. Labi. Maybe some words about the Rita Grusheva. She is my former student, and now she is the head of a very small museum on the border of the Latvia and Russia. But she has learned the complete ceramic culture, and now we decided to show you what we were able to do. Here you have the one of the greatest wetland region in Europe, with very good paleogeographic situation. Lake Lubāns is the greatest lake in Latvia, and 9 rivers came inside to this lake. And only one river, Aivieksē, they are going to the river Daugava. In this case, we investigated so much settlements of Middle and Late Neolithic. But now is the question about the amber working regions and amber working shops. It's very, very good theme for young people. Today, we will try to give you small information. Dzintars is a Middle Neolithic comb-ware culture settlement where traces of intensive amber processing have been found. The settlement is situated in the vicinity of very small tributary of Aivieksē, the main magistry. River called Dzintars, very close to Aivieksē. When localized by modern landmarks, the settlement is placed between the 2 drain passages through which via culvert water flows in Aivieksē River, dug by the land improvement technicians. The territory of settlement is marked by 2 meters wide and 200 meters long zone, which is situated perpendicular to Aivieksē River, but parallel to the bed of small river Dzintars. Dzintars settlement is quite prospective in the amber research field. It is determined by vicinity of Aivieksē River, the main waterway which linked Lake Lubāns region with Daugava and the farther on the way towards the seacoast of Litorina Sea. The situation of the settlement was guaranteed to support successful natural amber import and export of the produced amber goods. The situation of the settlement also determined the fact that its inhabitants could control the Aivieksē waterway and gain quite a welcome force coming from the neighbors when it comes to setting various needs of the economical nature. The first verification took place in 1971, uncovering only 6 square meters, and now, during the 2012, we excavated 8 square meters in the 3 area. During the process of excavation, it was done the all works, and we were able to check the traces of the amber working and also the fragmentary preserved amber items. Now we should see the amber collection of Dzintars, which was gathered together in 1971. Yeah, about the landscape. As you see here, it is the border of settlement. It is elevated part, and other part is located in the turf. Here is a bridge. Only one summer we had in this place such a bridge. Excavation area in some years ago, we discovered the place of where the stone pieces and also the very much concentrated ceramic fragments show the possibility to have this special living place. The material contains the typical bifacial arrowheads and much complete ceramic fragments. Here you are. Photo Rita Grusheva. And now about the materials. Collection consists of 29 adornments and their fragments, as well as 26 adornment work pieces. Among the former are 3 flat oval, 5 trapezoid, 1 tear-shaped, and 1 natural amber pendants. I would like to draw your attention to the pendant which is located in the center. It's very good example made partly of transparent amber, inside yellow. And I will draw your attention also to the place where always we have the borings or drillings. In this case, this has not been the typical biconical perforation. Instead, it is an ample oval-shaped hole, which leads to think that it could have been produced by piercing the amber with heated object or some different materials. It is only one such pendant in all Lake Luban wetland. And other one here, which has been preserved as a fragment. The frontal perforation, however, was supplemented with a drilling from the bottom. The tear-shaped, here you are, pendants are the other typical pendant type of conveyor culture. Meanwhile, the trapezoidal pendant with lightly curved bottom was produced from the plate. Other pendants of this type are fragmented, and we have difficulties to classify. In this is the collection. Beads also have died. Here we are in color. And this is the photo of this very important and interesting for us. I hope also for Finnish colleagues, because the analogues I had found in southwest Finland, 18 kilometers from the Turku. In the Kirikikasten cemetery, where the pendant was more wider, but also has such a variant of drilling. Here you are, the typical complex of conveyor culture amber items. Here you are rings, discs, button-shaped beads, and as you see also the working pieces. Also beads. Here are tubular beads, and two beads belongs to the Bronze Age. Here is one, 15, and also the double, 18. It means that this uncovered, unexcavated monument is very important for all Lake Luban wetland, because it was inhabited from Middle Neolithic, maybe via Late Neolithic, to the Bronze Age. We have a small number of Bronze Age amber items, and this means that we will be able to find it in future. And now, as you see here you are examples of semi-manufactured pendants of different workplaces. The first places, the second, the third, and fourth places, and grinding pieces also here is. The fact that the amber workers produced also adornments of magical nature is indicated by the zoomorphic figurines. Among the depictions, we saw two different, absolutely different types of figurines. One is maiden for plate, amber plate, and other is bulky. It is possible that the first is in middle Neolithic, and the second one is in late Neolithic. Here you are the item. Done. Details the settlements. Amber processing has been collected as stripe findings. It acting to age the settlements quite large prospects in the following years by setting out the amber culture, amber research as a rather preferable topic in further archaeological excavations. Already know the collected stripe findings in the desert amber processing workshop force one of heavily consider the role of the amber culture of the Lake Luban's depression in establishing of economic and cultural connections during the Neolithic period, namely 470 until 4070 until 4,000 years ago. But we have different data, radiocarbon data. The Lake Lubanus wetland has the data of comb and pit ceramics between 3,700 until 2,500 BC. The same time we saw that Finnish colleague Torvinen was written that it is this grave with this very interesting pendant oval is 2,1040 plus minus 150 years BC. It means that our very interesting and very nice item of our pendant maybe belongs to more later period. And so, thank you for attention. Very small.
Sorry. The next lecture by Maxim Chernyavsky from Belarus with the title Amber Ornaments at the Settlements of Krivina Peat Bog, Northern Belarus. It's very interesting area on the north of Belarus. Compact area with many peat bog settlements, and he is one of the author of the excavation in this area.
So, amber articles are quite rare at the sites of stone, bronze ages at the territory of Belarus because of their bad preservation in dry sandy soils. Less than 150 artifacts were found till now, and the burials of globular amphora culture in Neman region, at the burials of Middle Dnieper culture at Dnieper region, and at the settlements of Krivina Pitbog microregion. And the last place gave us almost a half of all known amber artifacts. Krivina Pitbog is situated in Vitebsk region at the border of Beshenkovichi and Seno district in southeastern part of Belarusian lakeland. The Krivina Pitbog is located among Asavets and Galovsk villages and is an eastern part of huge Pitbog massif. It is crossed by the small Krivina river, the left tributary of Dzvina Daugava river. This river, Krivina river, was canalized during the melioration of the Pitbog in 30th and 60s of the last century. During this melioration, 10 archaeological sites of stone and bronze ages were found. 2 of them were hardly damaged, and one Neolithic cemetery was completely destroyed during this melioration. One settlement was lost due to the Pitbog fire in 1937. Nevertheless, 9 Pitbog settlements with rich archaeological material in cultural layers are in good condition in present. 3 of them contains amber artifacts as well. The first one is settlement Krivina 1, found in 1934 by Konstantin Polikarpovich. Unfortunately, most part of the pre-war collections found at this site were lost during the World War II, and we do not know how many amber artifacts were there at that time. Another 8 amber articles were found during the excavations at the beginning of 60s. The second settlement is Asavets II, the most explored site of the region. It was discovered by Mikhail Chernyavsky in 1966, and beginning from 2008, I excavated the southern part of this settlement annually, and in total more than 55 amber ornaments and their fragments were found there. The third settlement is Asavets 7, which was discovered by Mikhail Chernyavsky as well in 2000, and it was excavated by me from 2000 till 2007 annually. Totally 7 amber artifacts were found there. The Asavets 2 and Krivina 1 settlements were founded by bearers of Usviati archaeological culture, the late Nara culture according to the earliest publications of Mikhail Chernyavsky. And they were founded in the end of the 4th millennium BC. In the middle of the 3rd millennium, this culture transformed into the northern Belarusian culture under the influence of bearers of corded ware ceramic traditions. Traces of their presence in the region were noted at the Krivina 1 and Asavets 2 sites in the last Usviati layers, and we could date it to the 2nd quarter of the 3rd millennium BC. The Asavets 7 site settlement was founded later than previous to. It includes almost clear materials of northern Belarusian culture with a small addition of the materials of Middle Dnieper and Middle Bronze Age ceramic. So, to the material. pendants makes up the greatest part of amber ornaments. The earliest of them are pendants with natural shapes with the frontal holes. Holes were made from both sides, and all these pendants were found mostly at Krivina 1 and Asavets 2 settlements, and one pendant was found at Asavets 7 settlement. They were common for bearers of Osviati culture, and the pendant from Asavets 7 looks quite strange among the other northern Belarusian materials. Other amber ornaments typical for northern Belarusian culture. So I guess that it could be a reuse of old Osviatian pendant, which was found at the different neighboring settlement, for example, Asavets 2, and why not to use such a rare material, rare pendant, even if it looks different than common. X-shaped pendants with the side holes, they could be divided into three groups. Asymmetrical, symmetrical with a straight blade, and symmetrical with the rounded or sharpened blades. They were found at all three settlements and are typical for materials of northern Belarusian culture. Finger-shaped pendants, they could have the side holes or complicated slanting holes. And they were found at Asavets 2 and Asavets 7 settlements, and all they belong to northern Belarusian culture. And this is quite, as for me, quite interesting type of pendants, because they are close to natural forms of Osviatian pendants, but you can also see the future forms of pendants which were used by northern bearers of northern Belarusian culture. For example, X-shaped, finger-shaped, and kettlebell-shaped. The other trace of this interim position is frontal holes. These pendants were found at Asavets 2 and Krivina 1 settlement, and they could belong to Osviatian population at late stage of the existence of this culture. And this pendant could present an influence of newcoming tradition, coded were traditions to the region. And these are two untypical for this microregion types of pendants. Big one, it could be a big X-shaped pendant, but we do not know the type of hole and the upper part of this pendant. And curved one with this side hole. Both of them were found at Asavets 2 settlement and together with northern Belarusian materials. Here are washer-shaped, lunar, and possibly number 5 key-shaped pendants. Unfortunately, we have no unhammered pendants of this group, except the lunar one, which could also be the reuse of broken washer-shaped form as well. All these pendants were found at Asavets 2 settlement and with materials of northern Belarusian culture. These items look like the mediators of complicated necklaces. Two of them have the form of parallelepipeds with beveled on the end holes. And the last one is triangular with front holes. number 1 and number 3 were found at Asavets 2 settlement, and number 2 at Asavets 7 settlement. And as the previous pendants, they were found with the materials of the northern Belarusian culture. And here we have beads, and they were found at Krivina 1 and Asavets 2 settlements, and they were found through all the time of the existence of these settlements, from Usviaty till the northern Belarusian culture. And buttons with U-shaped perforations or doublet with grooves of different forms, round, oval, and square. They were found at the Krivina 1 and the Asavets 2 and the Asavets 7 settlements. And round forms could be used by Sviatyan population of the late Neolithic. And the decoration of the edges of buttons by notches are typical for the ornaments of northern Belarusian culture, and they are typical for bone ornaments, pendants as well. Amber artifacts were at northern Belarus, in the Belarusian lakeland of great value, and broken items were thoroughly repaired, like these pendants and buttons. Repair was simple and consisted of drilling additional holes and cuts for mounting. Sometimes function of this article could be changed as a result of this repair. For example, number 3, the broken button was used after the repair as a pendant. And here's some chronology. As I said previously, pendants made from natural pieces of amber are the earliest type of the amber ornaments in the region. And they were used by the Usviatyan population. And I went to the northern Belarusian to show the reuse according to the found at the Asavets 7 settlement. Beads and round buttons are also early articles in the region, and the explosive diversity of amber products related to the northern Belarusian culture, and in types and in quantity. And the appearance of bearers of the coded ware ceramic traditions in the region probably had started this process. The absolute majority of the detected material has clear analogies with amber finds from the late Neolithic and Bronze Age settlement of Baltic region. This fact and the absence of traces of domestic production, except for minor repair traces, leads to the conclusion that the amber ornaments got to Krivina pit box sites along the Dzintars river in completed forms. And these amber products were an important part of further exchange with the territory of Upper Dnieper and the Upper Dzintars river. So this region was in a good stage for exchanging, in a good place. And amber ornaments were an important element of local spiritual tradition. In the last regard, we should note the close reference to amber primary sources of many local forms of bone and antler pendants at Krivina microregion. Sometimes the complexity of local copies bone copies exceeded the original source. Here you can see bone and antler key-shaped, number 1, 4, finger-shaped, washer-shaped, and kettlebell-shaped pendants from Osavets 2, Osavets 7, and Krivina 3 settlements. And all they had in origin the amber artifacts. Thank you.
Thank you for this paper, and the next lecture, Lars Larsson, the last our lecture from Sweden, with the title Neolithic Battle Axe in Amber. Please.
Okay. Move it. No. That looks, yes. Yeah, sorry. I'll try. Well, I'm going to talk about one single object. And that was found in the 1930s when they removed a stable at a farm in northern part of Öland. You see the star. We are situated a bit further to the east the moment. But that object was a very interesting perspective. It's a battle axe and made in amber. And as you can see, it's about 4.5 centimeters long. And when it was found, it broke in 2 pieces and is now repaired. And nowadays, it's stored at a small country museum on Öland, and it's not that well known, but it's a very interesting object because it's the only, as far as I know, only object of this kind in Sweden. It's a battle axe, and you can see the different aspects of it. The ring around the shaft hole, that is very marked, and the same with the ending in a knob. And the only thing that differ from an ordinary axe in shape, that's the edge, looking like a keel more like than a real edge. So we see, and here you can see some of the markings of the fabrication of this battle axe, the striations. They look very much like those on bone objects or antler objects. So I would suggest that it was partly made by a flint knife and then polished. But as you can see, the polish is not covering the entire surface. You look into more in detail, for example, this part, very similar to the list of the division that you find on stone battle axes. They imitate those copper axes coming from southeast. And even there, they have tried to establish a sort of relationship between the original stone axis, battle axis, and the amber axe. So they have really tried to put into all the different elements of a true battle axe. Same here, but as you can see, it's not quite polished. If you look here, there's no real damage of the shaft hole. I will come back to that later on, except for this glue that they made in the 1930s. And there are some pieces that are not that good made in technique. So I would say that it's not a cutter, amber cutter, that is very, very expert in making artifacts like this one. And the same with the keel of the, the edge of the artifacts. There are some pits at the end that I don't really understand. So if I might get some help from people around here about how they were manufactured, or if it's something on the amber piece that is still there from millions of years ago. I don't really know, but if you've got some information, please help me with that. I mean these. Well, I got knowledge about this battle axe by a friend of mine who is an amber cutter, and he had borrowed it down from the island to the southernmost part of Sweden where he's working, and he made a couple of new battle axes in amber of a special type, just to see how difficult it is to make them. And that is turned out to be, well, he had to use all his knowledge, but they could have made this axe better from the beginning. I don't know why. Well, this axe is very similar to what you, as I mentioned, to what you find in stone battle axes, and it is related to what we call the battle axe culture, or that's within the complex of the corded ware culture. And there are a few, or not that few as a matter of fact, miniatures of battle axes of this kind, but they are made in stone, like this one and this one. And most of them are not really shaped in a distinct way as this amber battle axe with different elements. They are normally a bit shorter comparing to the width than original battle axes. And they have been found all over the southern, over the Scandinavian peninsula. And they are found in children's graves, normally on the chest of a child, and they are also found as single finds. So we really don't know how they were related or how they were used as a kind of symbol within the battle axe culture. That's another one. Well, comparing to these miniature stone axes, the circles, the filled circles, comparing to this amber, well, none of them are as small as the amber one, but two of them are rather quite near to the size of this amber battle axe. Well, there's a number of amber pieces in the battle axe culture. There are discs, there are rings, and there are beads and pendants. But as I said, this X, as I know, is unique. And the interesting thing is that concerning the trade and connection between different areas in southern Scandinavia, there's a marked difference concerning axes and pottery between the Scandinavian peninsula and Denmark, especially the western part of Denmark in Jutland, where they have what they call the single grave culture. There's differences, but concerning amber ornaments, you find large similarities. So I would say that most of the amber pieces that you find in the battle axe culture in the Scandinavian peninsula do relate to these finds in Denmark, because most of the amber do originate from Denmark. So we have these similarities, but as far as I know, no battle axe of their type in Western Denmark has any comparison in amber. Well, concerning battle axes, if you look upon it in a South Scandinavian perspective, there are amber pieces, amber ornaments in the early Neolithic, that means about 4,000 to 3,500 BC, calibrated. There are a couple of beads that might resemble some of the battle axes, but not any that you can justify. But in the middle part of the Neolithic, that means 3,500 to 2,800, there are a small number of miniatures in stone, like this one, but there's also a large number of double-edged miniatures in amber. And most of them, as previously have been published, do originate from the megalithic tombs. But rather new excavation revealed these, I think it's 18 graves, and some of them are, most of them holds these kind of battle axe miniatures in amber. And all of these graves are for children from the age of 3 to the age of 6. So the question is this something that you also can relate to the megalithic tombs? That most of these miniatures, like I mentioned, miniatures in the stone axis, battle axis from the later battle axe culture, is also related to children. We don't really know, but in some cases, as you can see here, there are almost more than 40 beads of this kind of amber. And then we continue from 2,800 to 2000 BC, calibrated, the late Neolithic. As the only one, as I mentioned, was this battle axe, but there are also one other single piece, unique one, from the very, very late Neolithic. This one from the western part of Sweden. It's about 12 centimeters, so it's a bit larger, but it's in amber. And we do have some battle axes in stone, in the ordinary size, so to say, during that period. But there's just one formed in amber. There are, on the other side, axes that were more used for working. And they are rather similar with just a straight neck, like here if you cut it. And they do appear as a number of them as amber miniatures as well. So that's the situation with the amber axis and its relation to its miniatures and stone and the original ones also in stone, but used for, well, as we say, symbols more or less. Not really. We have a few examples that humans might have been killed by these battle axes, but there are very few examples of that. And probably most of them, the original ones in stone, were used as a kind of symbol in the society. Well, thank you.
For the discussion, or maybe 10 minutes. We begin our discussion. You have a question for...
I am Kazimieras Mizgiris. I am present at Amber Museum Gallery Vilnius and Nida. And we have 1,000 visitors every year in our Amber Museum in Vilnius and Nida. And we have exponated treasure of Juodkrantė, Kleps collection. And we have a lot of questions. Why this? Why these amulets used people? And I am a very concrete question for Elise. For Elise Lose, yeah. You was presented. For Elise Zagorska. You was presented your article very interesting, and my question is, because I must answer to my visitors, why, your opinion, why the people put the amber discs to the dead people? Why?
And I would be glad to understand it, but it's for all of us, for Stone Age researchers. As I said, it is a global phenomenon all over the world, and it is connected with some symbols of eternity. And in our country with amber, I interpret it as some light of the sun, and as these dead people could better see, and this sun's light to the next life. But who knows? Who knows? It's very, very difficult to say. As we know, these rings are used also in Siberia with this green shining jade. Also, it's found discs on eyes, and in Paleolithic it was bone discs, and in Sungir, and so it's all over the world. And in Africa we saw this was real burial from Africa with these bones bound and these discs in eyes. Of course, it is death cult, and it means something. And in the medieval times, people used coins on the placing on eyes. So it's very deep tradition, a very long-lasting tradition. One practical thing is to close eyes. on practical. We archaeologists always are looking practical thing, and then we try to interpret more, perhaps some religious or some, in beliefs and traditions and so. But I hope this question is open for all of us. I cannot myself. Yes.
No, I thought I tell you something which is, has to do with coins, but it has to do also with the beliefs. And this is in the Finno-Ugrian peoples. And the idea is that you put it there to close their eyes, but you close their eyes because you're afraid that that person, that the soul is still there. He looks around, he sees his relatives and friends around. He doesn't want to go. He leaves after a few days. He doesn't want to go, but he might want to take his friends or relatives with him. So they are close, so he doesn't do that. I thought that is a let's say, Finno-Ugrian tradition that goes back to the 19th century, at least.
Also to the Finno-Ugrian tribes, so thank you.
Dr. Zagorska showed us the famous Neolithic example from Jericho where there are cowrie beads on the eyes. And I think they probably have a different value. The cowrie bead is a symbol of fertility in many, many places, but also it's shaped a bit like an eye with the eyelashes. So those were two different things from your idea about the sun.
I just would have a small question for the first two presenters, which I don't know. My question would be rather if at the burial ground of, what did the name? The first burial ground, I'm sorry. Yeah? The lady, what was her name again? Mr. Gers. I just had a small question. Is there a differentiation in the quantity of amber beads regarding the gender of the person in the burial? For example, are there more beads in female burials?
These small discs, 2.5 centimeters approximately, and close to the head, they are only in male graves, But in female graves, there are some one or example of rings, but they are another form. They are bigger and not two, but one. And we have these rings under the skull of female, and so perhaps it was on the neck. But yeah, these two pairs, and in one, this 225, it was in eye sockets, and two next were by the head. It was double. It was 4 rings in eyes, perhaps. So. And answering, I forgot to say that you could saw this skull, a real skull from Zvenjaki in our Museum of History of Medicine, not close to here. They exhibit a very nice exposition about amber in medicine, and they also exposed this skull from our graveyard. So if you have possibility these days to go to this museum, they are also there. Thank you.
Any more questions?
I had for Lars Larsson. Do you, in this miniature battle axe, was there any indication of shafting in the shaft hole? Because it might stay in an amber, but not in the stone. But
I looked into it very carefully, but I couldn't find anything. And I also looked into it in order to see if there was something use-ware of, if it had been sewn to the breast or something like that. But there was none, no. So I don't really know how it was used. If it, well, if you just put a small branch in it, it won't give that much of a marking on it. So that's the situation.
About battle axe in amber. We have also the same amber axe, like axe shaped, but very simple form, like our axe. Also may be symbolic in our graves or in our settlements. You show in your presentation.
Well, these axes, they can, the miniature in stones and also the miniatures in amber, they couldn't be used for anything else but some kind of symbolism or marking of in the society of some kind. Battle axes are usually related to male graves, but in that case, with the small children, we don't know if it's any division of sex in them. That's impossible to see. So it might be that, as you can see in other parts of the prehistory, that miniatures might relate also to females, even if it's as the ordinary size and ordinary types are related to male. We have them in different pendants, for example.
In our graves, in the Middle Dnieper culture graves, more than 50 exemplars of our graves. We form of necklaces. Good.
Question to the Maxim Chernevsky. You told about these embers in North Belarusian culture and this corded ware culture, but have you in north of Belarus some influences from pit and comb ceramic, and can you connect with some amber finds also?
We have some traces of pit-comb ceramic, and we have even several sites with this material, clear material, but unfortunately these sites do not preserve any amber artifacts. It's a dry soil, so...
Is there any?
My question is to Maxim Chernevsky. Were there some traces of amber processing or amber workshops in your settlements in Krivina? No, thank you. Oh, thank you, and thank you for your interesting presentation.
Any questions? No?
Thank you for the attention. We are finishing. Yeah.